Hey everybody, this is Guillermo Padilla from Wayne, New Jersey. HomeTech is supported by listeners like me. To find out more, go to HomeTech.fm/support.
This is the HomeTech Podcast for Friday, June 15th from Denver, Colorado. I'm Jason Griffin, and welcome to this week's episode. This is a bit of a special episode. I am, as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, taking some time off from the show, so as you listen to this, I will be on a little bit of a vacation, and in preparation for heading out of town, we wanted to make sure that we had a show ready to go and get out and on the air for you to enjoy, and I think we have a great one. We had a gentleman named Eric Haynes on for an installment of our project, and Eric, I had a great time interviewing him. He's got a system that is really robust. He hired a professional. This was part of a new home build, and there were a lot of twists and turns that came in his journey of putting this system together, and I think it'll be a really interesting one for you to listen to. As I mentioned, there were some twists and turns, and as it turned out, he got through it and put together a really cool system with a lot of neat bells and whistles, including a nice 4K Dolby Atmos media room and of course audio throughout, a very robust network, and all of the things that you would expect from a pretty high-end professional installation. So hope you enjoy this. As I mentioned, this is kind of a special episode, so we're going to just jump right into the interview here momentarily. Before we do that, I want to send a quick thank you out, as we always do, to our supporters of the show. If you're interested in learning how you can support our efforts here at the HomeTech Podcast, head on over to HomeTech.fm/support, and that's where you can learn about our Patreon page. If you want to support our show, you can do that for as little as $1 a month. Any pledge over $5 a month, we'll give you a shout out on air, but every single pledge that we get, even at that dollar level, we'll send you an invite to our private Slack channel, The Hub, where you and other supporters of the show can gather every day for a little bit of inside baseball conversations about all things home technology. So we really appreciate that. Once again, one last time, that's HomeTech.fm/support. And without any further delay, let's go ahead and get into our interview here with Eric Haynes. Hey, Eric, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great, Jason. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. I always look forward to these project episodes, and it sounds like yours is going to be a lot of fun. I know you've had some twists and turns in your journey, and I look forward to diving into those. But before we get into the specifics, why don't you give our listeners just a quick personal introduction and talk about what your interest is in the smart home?
So I've been in the technology world for several decades. I won't say how many, but I've always been kind of the first adopter at everything. And so when smart homes started popping up, as early as 10 years ago, you started seeing things popping up, especially with Z-Wave and those kind of things, and the light switches with Lutron. I was always getting one or two of those and start putting them in whatever house, or even when I was in an apartment, I'd start putting all that stuff in. And then I'm a big movie buff, AV, audiophile kind of guy as well. So I'm always early adopting all of that stuff. I used to be in a band. I used to work with movie filmmakers. So I love all that stuff. And so it's just the convergence of those worlds is kind of where I live in that home tech, is like, where does the smart home help me enjoy the music and the movies and make just life a lot easier for me.
Very cool. So you're an enthusiast for sure, and not somebody who does this by trade, right?
That is correct. Not by trade at all. I wish I knew more about it.
Well, it sounds like you're going through sounds like you've been through the school of hard knocks a little bit. So I'm sure you're probably further along than maybe you even appreciate. But let's jump in and talk about that. I know you mentioned that you, I think fairly recently, bought a new house, and it was, or built a house. I'm not sure which one, but you had kind of a blank slate opportunity, and tell us about that.
Yeah. So be careful what you wish for, I guess. So we were building a new house, and it took us, quite a while to get the house done. It was about 18 months. They told us it would take us 6 months. We started building in 2015 and moved in November 2016.
Wow.
And during that time, the very first phone call I made to the builder was, I want to have a media room, and I want it to be like this, and I want to have a central wire closet, I want it to be like this, and then I want to be able to add all this home tech and smart home stuff in there, and I wanted sky's the limit. I wanted every switch in the house to be a smart switch, and every light to be a smart light. And as we started getting in, started building, started wiring it, and I started watching what they were doing, and I started asking questions, and they would go like, oh, well, how does that work? Well, we've never done that before. And so I started finding out that they had no idea how to build a smart home, and they were telling me they did. And so I had to go find a company to help me go do it. That was kind of on the side. So they kept saying, well, use this guy. And he'd come in, he knew how to do an alarm system, but he didn't know how to do anything else. And so I found someone that could help me, and he was working with the builder while we were building. But things would happen, like I'd come in on the day they were wiring all the network closet stuff, and it was in a downstairs closet that was supposed to be for a food pantry. And
oh man,
I'm like, that's not going to work. It's supposed to be upstairs in the center of the house so we can get the best signal, and it could be right next to the media room. And so, you know how that is. The wires already run, they're already cut. And so that was 2 weeks of arguments trying to get them to redo that. So they finally redid it. And then we were trying to get everything that was put in the house, like alarm systems, all the detectors for the windows and everything would tie back into this closet so we could tie it all in one system. So after we went through a couple different vendors that didn't know what they were doing and made mistakes like that, we found this one group was really good. Guy's awesome. He's actually helped a couple friends of mine do their houses since, and even their businesses. But it was 2015, 2016. There wasn't really, they didn't have a lot of experience with like Dolby Atmos and some of the things I wanted to do. So they were learning with me as I was doing it. So I'd done a practice setup at my previous house. So I kind of understood Atmos. I had the right receiver. I had a Onkyo 3030. So I think it gives me like 9.2 channels or something like that. And I wanted to upgrade the projector and just build the room around it. So when I came in and the first guy was coming in to build a media room around Dolby Atmos, all the speaker holes were in the wrong places and they didn't measure them out.
Right.
And Atmos is super particular. And I think it won't matter in the long run. I think they'll get better at it. Like DTSX, you can pretty much put the speakers anywhere you want. But these guys, they really had no idea. And they were like centering all the speakers with the screen, not the room. And there was a lot of arguments kind of that went back and forth on that. And, everyone has their different opinion too, but
sure.
So we started scoping out the whole house once we found these guys. And so we wanted a smart doorbell. We didn't want Ringer. We wanted something that was more robust than that. And Ringer was pretty new at the time too, and it wasn't working very well the first year or two it was out. A lot of wireless issues when you had a bigger home and it had to go 100 feet. It just, it was tough. So they're like, well, if we do that, and then I have this big door, so this little doorbell just kind of looked dinky. So we got what did we get? We got this door station from Control 4. It's like an industrial looking, pretty big looking door station, camera built in. It could do touchscreen. If you want to do a number to unlock your door, we didn't do that, but it has high def video on there and sound is amazing. But we wanted that so we could control it anywhere in the house and connect it to the Control 4 system. So throughout the house, we put speakers. So we put speakers in almost all the rooms. So we had a Sonos throughout our whole house in the previous house. So we wanted to kind of use both. And so we did in like the main family room, we built in speakers that we were going to use for the TV and for home audio. And then we have a game room that, it's really kind of the kids' toys room, I guess now, but speakers in there, speakers on the back patio, in the master bath, in my office, and in the dining area. So kind of where all the guests would hang out.
Right.
And we built those in, and then we augmented the rest of the house with Sonos speakers around and taken the ones I had before and just kind of put them in there. And so the idea was if the doorbell rang, you could control where the doorbell rang in the house. So it wouldn't have to be in the whole house. So if I want to be on the patio, like we're going to do today will be out on the, in the pool area, and we want to hear the doorbell ring on the pool area, because how many times you've been to a house where you're ringing the doorbell and everyone's in the backyard and
right,
no one knows, right?
Yeah.
Or you're in your media room. The other thing we did is we wanted it to be able to ring in the media room, but instead of the doorbell sound over the speakers, we set it up so it flashed the lights in the media room. So it's just like
okay,
a little flash.
Yeah, you guys did it big.
Yeah, we planned it out pretty well. I'm the kind of guy who gets pen and paper, the drawing of the house, figure out all the workflows. Where am I going to walk when I listen to music? It's a little bit too much probably, but
yeah. Well, no, I think just hearing you go over some of those initial challenges, it really reinforces something that I think some people don't realize when they first start thinking about a smart home or first start planning to do a smart home, is that infrastructure and getting the planning phase right is really, really important. Now, today there are a lot more wireless options out there, of course, and while that is far from a silver bullet, it does give you a little bit more flexibility than you used to have, say, 10 years ago. But still, when you start talking about doing a system the way that you are, things like Dolby Atmos and you want a door station that can integrate into the house audio system and perhaps even video and things of that nature, that requires a whole different level of thought and planning. And as you alluded to, it's often something that builders aren't necessarily comfortable doing, right? It's not in their wheelhouse, and maybe they've got their electrician that they've been using for 10 years, but they don't really quite understand it either. So I think your experience there is very representative of why you benefit from going out and hiring somebody who's a specialist who can really help you lay that foundation and get that aspect of the project right, so that you've got the flexibility moving forward.
I agree 100%. What I would add to that is I was talking to a friend of mine who's about to go build a home, and he'll want a smart home. He wants a very modern home. I'm telling everybody what I learned the most is that the builders never engage the vendors and the home tech companies fast enough. You need to engage them at the beginning when they're putting the studs up before any wires go in. They need to get engaged early.
Yep.
They never engage them early enough.
Yeah, and all of the professionals who listen to the show are nodding their heads in agreement right now. It is a major problem, not just for the tradesmen who have to then sort of scramble to go in and figure things out, but ultimately for the consumer, for the end user. It creates situations where unnecessary compromises have to be made, and it is something that I've always advocated for as well. You need to start planning for how you're going to lay out your home technology infrastructure at the same time that you start planning, how you're going to lay out your electrical infrastructure. And
and it's a tricky balance too, because they're worried about, they're going to lay the 100-foot HDMI cable and the 230-foot fiber HDMI cable that costs $500 down, and someone's going to steal it,
Right.
But no one ever stole the stuff out of our house, luckily. But what would happen is someone would put a staple or a nail through a $500 cable.
Yeah, which is definitely a risk, and why I always advocate for pulling a lot of Cat X, whatever you decide, Cat 6. Some people are even doing Cat 7 these days.
Haven't done 7 yet. Got the 6.
Yeah,
though.
well, I think 7 is a little bit overkill personally, but reasonable minds can disagree on that. So let's jump in. It sounds like you had your battles with the infrastructure, and you were really having to think some of this stuff through, perhaps on the fly a little bit because of it. But it sounds like you did a good job of reining it in and getting that infrastructure right. And I know you did have to prioritize some decisions on the finish side, and it sounds like the media room was a really big deal for you, and you alluded to Atmos, and it sounds like you've got 2-piece projection in there. So walk us through the media room specifically and how you guys get to enjoy that on a daily basis.
Cool. Yeah, it's funny because we moved into several houses over, we've been lucky enough to be able to kind of upgrade over the years. And the media room always seems to come together first, and it's like, when the rest of the house is still a hot mess and not working, you can go upstairs.
Still got movie night.
Yeah, we still got movie night and go watch Blade Runner, and so it's So we had walked around another house, and it was a football player. He used to be in Dallas, went to Denver, DeMarcus Ware. He just retired, I
Oh
think, a
yeah.
year ago.
Yeah.
So we were walking. We didn't know it was him, but we were walking through the house, and we're like, "Man, really like this house. It's nice." He had a designer come and did it. But when we walked to the media room, he had did this. It was all gray. Everything was kind of a shade of gray, and then there was one pop of color. I think they had purple or something. It wasn't blue or orange like you would think it would be for him, but it was like just a dark kind of color, single color, and then it was all like just comfy, just custom couch that went around the whole, 3 walls of the room, all facing the screen. It wasn't the theater seating, and that made us think, like, wow, we like that. We don't want to do the theater seating. We don't want to do the steps, and we have lots of friends that have that stuff, and we can appreciate it. And we like watching movies at their houses, but for us, we just wanted somewhere you could hang out, but it still felt together, and it felt like really and it worked well with kind of the sound of the video. So the first thing we actually bought was a couch that we had to have designed, so we knew how big the room was going to be, and so we had a couch that was delivered to us to fit in the room. And then we painted everything gray, and then we did the 9 speakers for the Dolby Atmos, which the audio guys, they were looking at us funny, like we weren't sure what we were doing. But we did 2 in the back, 2 on the side, the 3 in the front, sub is in the front corner, and then we did 4 in the ceiling. And the 2 of the ones in the front, because the room isn't as big as we were hoping it was going to be, and it's got a weird place for entering the room. We went with a little bit smaller screen than we wanted. We wanted a 110-inch screen. We wanted a 120. We went with the 100, and it's not centered in the room. So what we also did is hid some of those front speakers behind it. So we ended up getting a Dragonfly acoustic weave 100-inch screen.
Okay.
And it worked really well. It works well. Sometimes I think it doesn't work, like my ears, like I doubt the sound. Like I always think it could be better. And, you get in those modes when you're tweaking stuff and you're always like, overtweaking it. So we got one channel, 2 channels, like the center channel and the right front behind it. So the left front channel is probably a little bit louder based on the calibration that the Onkyo does for the room. So then we did several lighting systems too. We didn't do that traditional kind of LED wrapped around the bottom or the top of the room, but we did like kind of some more industrial lighting that we liked, that just made it kind of feel, again, kind of like you're in a designed room that's not supposed to be a theater room. We did blackout blinds. I just got the blackout blinds last week, so we were in the house almost a year and a half now, and I just got those. But most of the blackout blinds that I saw, I wasn't happy with them, because they'd be black on the inside and white on the outside. So you would see a white thing on the outside, and I wanted them black on both sides, or they weren't like consistent. So I was very picky about kind of that blackout blinds thing, which actually changed the sound last week in the room. So I had to recalibrate everything.
Yeah.
My wife's like, it sounds the same to me. I don't understand.
Yeah. It sounds fine, Eric. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, Private Ryan didn't sound right. And I just got that new 4K Atmos one. So that's been my demo for the last 2 weeks. But then I wanted to get some stuff on the walls too, to help with the acoustics without being too obvious. So I got these canvas prints. They're kind of these, I sent you a couple pictures of them, but they're like these modern recreations of like The Fifth Element and Mad Max and Dune, some of my favorite classic movies. And they absorb all the sound, that bounces around on the walls on that side. And it's worked out really well how we've placed everything. And I hadn't had to go put a bass thing in the corner or do anything weird in some random spot in the room to get the echoes out.
Right.
And it's noticeable when you walk in here with the really thick carpet and the furniture, because this furniture also absorbs the sound better than those theater seats a lot of times. And it's dead as soon as you walk in here. And like I record my own podcast in here often because it sounds perfect. And then people fall asleep on the couch while they're watching us do it. But
yeah, no, that's really important. And I remember very vividly from the many years that I spent in the field, working on high-end media rooms and theaters, is that calibration part of the project really has to happen. And a lot of times it's tough on big projects where homeowners are rushing to get moved in, and there's, a million things going on, and it's down to the wire, and you have to explain that, hey, to properly calibrate this room, we're going to have to come back in a week or two when the house is quiet, all of the furniture is in place, because all of that stuff can have, a pretty significant impact on the sound. And if you're just talking about a little sound bar in your living room, then that's probably not a big deal. But when you go to the trouble of putting together an Atmos media room like you've done, then it's crazy not to see it through, right? And really make sure that calibration is done correctly. Tell me also about the video, by the way. We've talked a lot about the audio. You mentioned 4K. What are you doing for projection?
Yeah, so for projection, we got the Epson UBS 6040. So it's that fake 4K. But, when they sold it to me, they told me it was real 4K.
It happens.
So, oh, my goodness. But it looks really, really
it's called,
good.
There's a good term for that. It's called faux K.
Okay, yeah. I like that.
FAUX.
Yeah, I like that, but I hate it at the same time.
Right.
But even the real 4K projectors, they don't look the same. I got 4K TVs in every room, 65, 75-inch TVs throughout the house, and they don't compare, especially with the HDR settings and all of that. The blacks are never quite as inky or dark as they are on the LEDs. But it looks pretty phenomenal, and it doesn't have that goofy, fake, extra interpolated images.
Soap opera effect.
Yeah, it doesn't have that, which is what I was really trying to avoid, because especially in 2016, that was the only option you had, was a lot of that crazy soap opera looking stuff. This one doesn't do it. It's really strong, and people are really impressed by it. But I'm ready to change it out and get a 4K, and I'm happy to see that these things are still selling for almost full price as used, because people really like these Epson 6040s, and the 6040 is a dealer-only model, so they're really hard to get.
Right.
Because they're the black one with the case on the back to hide all the wires and all of that. But I've been really happy with it, and I want to switch it out, but I'm so happy with how much it doesn't throw a lot of heat off. It doesn't have all this extra light that lights up the room. And I've always kind of liked the Epson ones. And I think this is a great version, one of the best versions they've ever come out of their projector.
Yeah, very cool. You mentioned lighting and shades. What are you using for those systems?
So the shades, that was another thing. It's like, okay, we're gonna smart home everything out, we're going to make the shades smart. We're going to have them controlled. We're going to put them on scenes where you walk in the room, hit a button. We got tired of all that and never got to the whole scene setting thing in all the rooms. We even installed some of the switches, and we started running into trouble or issues or not really deciding what the scene should be. And as soon as that happened in one or two rooms, we never actually did it in the media room, because we're like, oh, we're going to have the shades, come up. And then when we turn in the movie mode, they'll go down. Well, we realized we kept them down for a year and never moved them up while we had temporary ones in. So we decided not to make the shades smart, but we went with some Hunter Douglas, some Hunter Douglas blackout shades. And I never thought I would put Hunter Douglas shades in a media room, but I liked the way that they framed them up, and it blocks out the light a lot better than some of the professional ones the distributors have to offer.
Yeah.
The lighting.
And sometimes there's virtue to keeping things simple, right? I think a lot of times people do. I remember working with clients who would come into it and have a similar experience where it's like everything, I want everything automated and everything on scenes. And then when they actually get into the process of going through that and understanding what's involved with not only the installation, but with the programming and the customization, oftentimes things will change. And if having manual blinds in there works better for you, then that's a better way to go, right?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And we did a couple different things with the lighting. So we wanted kind of like the moody, subtle lighting. So we got like these restoration hardware looking industrial lights for the side walls that give it a cool look, but then we have the brighter lights that are built into the ceiling, so we can light up the whole room a lot more, and we can put those ones on dimmers, so that way we have kind of a different mix. And then we have a restroom and a wet bar with refrigerator and all that on the side, so those have lights, and I didn't want to see any of those lights, so we installed all the lights in those side rooms so you can't see them when the doors are open. And then we didn't install a single switch. There's no light switches in this room either, in the media room, because we didn't want to see the light switches or any of that and the reflections off of those plastic plates. So we installed those in strategic places just outside the room.
Got it. And you mentioned Control 4 earlier for the door station. Is Control 4, is that how you're driving the lighting?
Yeah, we're doing that. We got the EA5 system. There's probably something better by now, but we started tying everything into that. I wish I knew more how to set it up, because I always am the one that breaks it and have to call the guys and go, hey, broke it again. I don't know what happened. And they reset it. I set it up so they could connect remotely, and they fix things for me remotely sometimes. So it's kind of nice.
Yep.
But we did the Control 4, system for everything that we could in the media room, and then attach some other rooms to it as well.
Got it. You mentioned TVs throughout the rest of the house. Are you guys doing distributed video from a central location, or are those other TVs fed from local sources?
So we wired the whole house to do distributed video. And also, kind of getting back to the infrastructure things, where we were in this weird place where wireless was starting to get better, and it still isn't there yet, a couple years later. But we just said, okay, we're going to wire Cat 6 to every place there's going to be a TV. And then we're also going to run another Cat 6 that can be converted to an HDMI cable later. That's one of the reasons we like the Cat 6 too. And then we then started debating whether to run fiber to all of those, because in the media room, even with the projector 15, 20 feet away from the head unit, it had to run fiber in order to get the full 4K connection, because a regular HDMI connector couldn't carry the signal. So I've run fiber or HDMI to the main network closet to like my office and a couple of the TVs, because the idea is, and I haven't even plugged it in the office. I have got some more work to do in there, but the idea is to have a TV up there, be able to do a Skype call on it, and hold meetings, and be able to throw the audio to the speakers that are built into the ceiling as well, and be able to control that, and then kind of push it to wherever I wanted. But the main reason we decided not to do distributed videos, it just, the cost got so crazy.
Yeah.
It was more than the TV's cost. It was just like, it was insane. And then I'm like, well, I'll just use the network connections. Well, I almost don't even use the network connections. It's almost all wireless, but I feel good having them there, especially since like the DirecTV app doesn't work on the TV through wireless anyway, which is absurd.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and no matter how fast your connection is, you always get buffering on the DirecTV stuff anyway.
So it works by spec, but you're saying it just doesn't perform reliably.
Yeah, it doesn't, and it's kind of annoying. But I think in general, I mean, you also have to keep it simple for everybody around you, because I mean, no matter how much I know about it, you get that call going, I'm trying to turn the TV on, and you got to keep it simple for the other folks in the house, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of that, are you guys using any sort of, you mentioned your dealer could remote into the Control 4 system. Are you using any sort of remote management system like a Domotz or a Hiji? Are you familiar with those?
I am familiar with them, but we haven't gotten there. That's what some of those next things that I want to do. And when we were getting to that phase, because we spec'd out all the rooms, then when we started running into challenges in some of the rooms, some of that fell down the list. And we said, okay, we'll get back to that, especially when things were taking a lot more time. Those things became less important. And one of the things, too, is we wanted our home builder was going out of business. And so we were trying to close our house before they shut the doors and we didn't get our house. It was
Wow.
a sad story for 40 other people that didn't make it. But
Wow, that's terrible.
it is awful. They took the money and ran from a bunch of people. But so we were trying to close everything down, and so we had to shorten the list. And we're like, okay, we'll do all this later. And of course, you never could do anything later.
Right. You kind of get that one shot, and that's it. But thankfully, those are an easy thing to retrofit in. There's very little installation involved. It's really just configuration, and they can be very helpful for I always talk about this. We sometimes talk about those remote systems management platforms like IHG, and we think of them as largely as a dealer tool. But I think that certain aspects of those, I think of a platform like Domotes, where you get an end user app, or Snap AV has one where the end user can go in and quickly reboot things. And oftentimes that's helpful for the situation like you described, where you've got a spouse or a partner or a son or whoever, right? A babysitter in the home who's trying to get the system to work. And if you can quickly go on and diagnose and reboot things, that can be a really nice thing.
Yeah, a lot of times it's just restarting. And one of the things we were looking at is our dealer offered us these Control 4 switches, and I got one, but I haven't programmed it yet. And you could set scenes. And so what we were doing is we're setting up the switches. And this is one of the things I'm going to go back to and talk to them about in a month or so, is I wanted a button in the room that would just turn everything on. Just turn the TV on, turn it off, and then they could just use the remote control as they saw fit. Because even the Control 4 remote control with all-in-one, they still gets messed up and things get out of whack, or it needs to be rebooted or recharged a lot. You got to charge it way too much, in my opinion. I'm thinking about starting to put those switches on the wall where I can set scenes that just turn things on and off as well.
Yeah, there's something to be said for a simple button, push here to turn the room on, right? I think unfortunately, there's a bit of an intimidation factor. And as hard as companies like Control 4 work to make things simple, right? Push the watch button and then choose cable. Some people just see that remote and there's an instant reaction where they almost shut down, right? And I think that unfortunately that's a reality for a lot of users, and you have to consider that when you're designing your system. So I want to shift gears a little bit here, because you've talked about quite a bit, and it sounds like you've got a very robust installation, and you've done quite a bit in your home. And obviously the backbone of all of this is the network. Yes. And we've alluded to that a little bit. What are you guys doing for your network?
So we put in a Luxel gigabit router. You gotta go gigabit, if you're gonna have more than, if you're gonna be out of range of your wireless connection, you gotta go gigabit. And then we ran two of their three of their wireless units evenly distributed through the house. So it almost looks like, what you see in an office, and that's kind of how I saw it. And back then they didn't have, you couldn't go to back then. Yeah, it sounds so old, 2 years ago. Back then in the day, they didn't.
It's changing fast though.
They didn't have any mesh network solution, and nobody even talked about what a mesh network was, even though we did that in our office buildings for more than a decade now.
Right. Yeah, I was just going to say they had them, but not in the sort of consumer form factor that we have them today.
Right. So I was looking at a commercial, this was still a commercial version of a home product, right? Because it wasn't available unless you go through a dealer. Because I was looking at Arachnus, and I was looking at Arachne and all that stuff. And then now you go into Best Buy, they have a $350 mesh network that actually works.
Right.
It's amazing. I'm like, of course that happened after I get mine. So I went with the commercial priced stuff, and it works awesome. I never have to reset this stuff. It's amazing. So I have my router that's intercepts the connection. That I turned the Wi-Fi off on my incoming. What's the used to be. What's the name of that? Verizon Fios, used to be Fios. So I have a good 100 plus connection coming in, and I had turned off the wireless on that, plugged it into the Luxel, used that for wireless that's distributed through the 3 units that are connected with Cat 6 cable. So you get a very strong connection throughout the whole house. And wireless, I mean, it doesn't change gateways or weird things on you, and you don't lose connections when you're walking around or go in the backyard. The mother-in-law, I have a 80-year-old mother-in-law living at home, or 75-year-old mother-in-law, and I showed her how to play YouTube from her iPad to any of the TVs in the house, and I almost regret it, because we'll be watching TV and she'll pick the wrong one in the other room, and this thing pops up
funny.
all the time. Yeah. So
but she's good. She knows how to use it. It sounds like. That's great.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. Very cool. Well, we are running up a little bit against our time. I do want to ask a couple more questions, sort of forward looking. Forward and a combination of forward and back, and you'll see what I mean here. Let's start with forward looking. What are your next plans? You've alluded to a couple of little things, but what's the next big project on your agenda?
Well, I definitely want to look at getting those keypads, those Control 4 keypads in there to simplify things. I haven't done the garage door integration yet. I want to do that, the security integration. So I have it all wired for all of that. I was also trying to find some good deadbolts that I could use with either a phone or a keypad that would integrate with the Control 4 system as well. And 2 years ago, there wasn't a good solution. They didn't really integrate. So really getting to that security and being able to control it from the remotely. So once I have those in, it'll be more important for me to be able to control it remotely for sure.
Right. And then one of the other questions I look forward to hearing your answer on this one, because of the twists and turns that you've been through. And I think those are common experiences for a lot of people, especially who have done a project of the size and frankly complexity of what you guys have done there. What would you tell somebody who's listening, who's just getting started on planning or early conceptualizing of their own whole home smart home project?
I would say go do as much research as you can, looking at real world. Go look at other houses that have it installed, see different ones, see how people are doing it, see how different companies have done it, and then see how people interact with it. Pay attention to that when you're in the houses, because you don't want to buy something you're not going to use, and you don't want to not be able to use it because it stops being usable. Like we have a wall, like it looks like an iPad from the control system. It's that wall door, not the door station, but the wall station, and it's like that 7-inch
touchscreen.
We don't even use that, and it's because it gets out of sync with Spotify or something else, and they got to reset everything, and so we never use it except for when it pops up on the doorbell. So get a good understanding how you really understand kind of the workflow of where it would interact and enhance things. Don't overdo it and find out you're not going to use all this stuff. Find something practical, and then the day you decide who you're buying a house from or building a house with, or you're going to start the project, get them involved that day.
Right. Yeah. Early on. I think that's great advice, because a lot of times people don't, especially nowadays with the Amazon Alexas and the Google Homes and the Ring doorbells of the world, the smart home means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And I think only by going out and really seeing what these different installations look like and really understanding, okay, everything is centralized and there's this big rack we've got to plan for, and where are we going to put that, and how are we going to ventilate the closet, and what sort of control points do we need, touchscreens, all of these things that come into play almost instantly, right, when you see it. But if you've never really seen that before, it's definitely worth taking the time to ask your builder if there's homes that they've done before that you can go walk, or ask your integrator if you're hiring a professional, if you can go see some other installations and get a feel for that, because I would say even in the showroom environment is not always very representative of what it actually looks like out there in the real world. So I think that's great advice.
I think you definitely got to hire an integrator for, you don't have to do it for everything, but you should do it for the infrastructure and the basic stuff. And you can figure out how to add, some simple things, to it. But I think you definitely need to get an integrator involved if you want to get the basics right.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It calls to mind a blog post. I'm not sure if you saw this recently, but Charlie Kindle, he was the head of smart home for Alexa, and just recently departed maybe 2 or 3 months ago, if that, probably less. But he's blogging about redoing his home. He's got a professionally installed system that was done, I think, back in the early 2000s, and he's getting ready to overhaul that. And he put out a blog post about the importance of concierge home technology, is what he referred to it as, and the importance of hiring a professional. And I thought that was really interesting, because from the perspective of an end user, to see that somebody so immersed in the world of DIY smart home, even he is talking about the importance of hiring a professional, I think is really, there's a good takeaway there, right?
What if you could I could see a future of it where there is a concierge subscription model where you pay kind of a retainer on a monthly basis and you get access to somebody that can help you.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And that's something that, as listeners to the show know, I live and breathe in my day job at One Vision Resources. That's our vision of the future, is that really this world moves to more of a monthly model where people are paying somebody on a recurring fee to manage and set up and support and service all of these systems and keep them up to date. So I think you're 100% right there. And it's really a question of specifics and what that looks like and how long it takes us to get there. But anyways, Eric, this was a great conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on, and I'm sure listeners to the show have taken a lot away from this. If there was anybody listening who wanted to perhaps connect with you and ask some follow-up questions, is there a good way for them to do that?
Yeah, the easiest way to connect to me is through my podcast, Words of Mass Disruption. So it's wordsofmassdisruption.net. And its email is eric@wordsofmassdisruption.net. I love answering these questions. I get a lot of these questions already. Talk to a lot of folks at work about this on a regular basis.
Cool. Yeah, because you guys on your show, you talk about the world of technology in general, right? Tell us, one or two sentences about your show real quick.
Yeah, so we try to talk to the people that have been there, kind of the world of disruption where, like the Blockbuster story, what happened with people that were there, executives that were there, and what is happening now with, the folks that are in there making leadership and decision makers in those positions today. Right.
Well, there's certainly no shortage of disruption happening in the smart home right now, so I can see the potential for a lot of overlap, and I'm sure our listeners would enjoy that. So we'll be sure to include a link to that in our show notes. And Eric, thank you once again for taking the time to come on and join us.
Thank you very much, Jason. I had a great time.